Bridging the Gap, Connecting Capabilities and the Supplemental Poverty Measurement by Mason Greist and Bailey Briley. Poverty is prevalent in America. Regardless of the source one uses, the number of people in poverty in the U.S. well exceeds 10% of the population. We define poverty as a restriction on a person's capability to achieve a dignified human life. Though this is an abstract definition, we believe that it is the best one because it takes into account a person's level of well-being and feeling of self-importance. In measuring poverty, however, we believe that the SPM, or Supplemental Poverty Measure, is the best tool we have because it allows us to address concerns over those in poverty because of financial shortcomings. The way that our government currently measures poverty is the OPM, or Official Poverty Measure. The OPM was established in 1963 by Social Security employee Molly Orshansky. Orshansky determined that the average family of 3 or more spent 1/3 of its pre-taxed income on food. She thus multiplied this number by 3 to determine the official threshold for poverty. The OPM measures someone's income as his or her pre-taxed income without including his or her benefits, whether near cash or in kind, or non-discretionary expenses, such as childcare or transit costs relating to work. There are problems with Orshansky's measurement because it assumes that poverty is defined as simply a phenomenon of income deprivation. It is an absolute measurement and thus cannot account for the depth of poverty. For instance, someone falling $100 short and someone falling $5,000 short of the poverty line are both considered impoverished, but one is clearly worse off. The measurement also does not account for either near cash or in-kind benefits. Lacking these elements, the measurement is outdated and has not changed except for accounting for inflation since its inception in 1963. To combat some of these problems, the U.S. Census Bureau has suggested a definition of poverty based not on a person's pre-taxed income, but his or her income with in-kind benefits added and non-discretionary expenses subtracted. This measurement, dubbed the Supplemental Poverty Measurement, has been outlined by Kathleen Short, and takes a more relative approach to the issue of measuring poverty for policy than does the OPM. The SPM creates a threshold based on a dollar amount that covers the basic needs of food, clothing, shelter, and utilities, or FCSU. It gets a little tricky here, so pay close attention. The SPM considers spending of the entire nation on FCSU needs. It takes the spending of the 33rd percentile on FCSU needs and multiplies this number by 1.2 to account for additional basic needs. This updated threshold accounts for household expenditures and, unlike the OPM, provides for a more substantial life than the OPM does in its emergency rations allowance. The SPM, however, implies a definition of poverty with which we are not satisfied. It still focuses purely on income deprivation, and the definition of poverty that comes from this does not account for the well-being of those in poverty. Nor does it account for the opportunity individuals have at improving their situation for the long term, rather than just getting by on a daily basis. After all, don't we want people in poverty to be able to leave it permanently through their own efforts? Some important minds in the study of poverty have suggested the use of capabilities to define poverty. Specifically, Amartya Sen defines poverty as capability failure of an individual. In order to understand this definition, we must define capabilities. Sen's definition of a capability is someone's ability to do valuable acts or achieve valuable states of being. It is defined not as actual achievement of an individual, but his or her potential to be or do. The best way to define poverty. Martha Nussbaum has created a list of 10 capabilities that she determines essential to lead a dignified human life. We found that all of these capabilities are necessary, and also that the U.S. government provides many of these capabilities. The well-being of a person and his or her chance at achieving success in America is part of what we have always called the American dream. It is necessary, therefore, that we consider those in our nation who do not possess this intrinsic ability impoverished, regardless of their monetary situation. So then if we define poverty by the capabilities of an individual, do we measure it that way too? We think not. The capabilities approach is too abstract, and thus it is virtually impossible to put a numerical value on how much capability a person requires. Many people consider this a fallacy of measurement, meaning that we do not choose capabilities as a measurement simply because it is too hard to put a number on how much capability failure one has. This, however, is not the case, as we will explain later. Furthermore, as said earlier, the United States makes provisions for most of the capabilities, such as providing education and fulfilling the capability for practical reason, as well as senses, imagination, and thought. Nor does the OPM do a sufficient job of measuring poverty. The same flaws which prevent it from defining poverty correctly, that is, its absolute nature and outdated standards, prevent it from effectively measuring poverty, even though it is used by the U.S. government today. Iceland notes that the amount of food that the OPM deems adequate provides only an emergency rations diet, hardly sufficient or healthy for a family living on this diet daily. Although it does not do justice to poverty's depth in its definition, the SPM is the best measurement of poverty today. Its quasi-relative approach, which gives an absolute threshold but also accounts for a small amount of extra income, allows us to determine a certain depth of poverty by realizing the number of people receiving benefits and the quantity of those benefits. As Kathleen Short notes in her article explaining the SPM, there are many factors that the SPM includes in its definition of income that the OPM does not. From this chart, we can see that accounting for medical out-of-pocket expenses would put 3.3% more of the population into poverty. Meanwhile, the benefit of SNAP pulls about 2% of the population out of poverty. Gauging how benefits and non-discretionary expenses impact those in poverty is a major benefit of the SPM. The SPM is the best tool for measuring poverty because it provides an approach to policy based on middle ground. This tempered measurement places a concrete number on the poverty threshold while taking into account, to some degree, the intangibles of the capabilities definition. Furthermore, using the SPM allows us to consider capability failure while also determining the ability of people to be or do based on their spending power. Thus, our use of the SPM is not simply taking the easy route, but indeed allows us to take the best aspects of the other two measurements and make a holistic measurement. So where is the bridge between a definition based on a broad range of capabilities and a measurement using the SPM which, though quasi-relative, does not account for many of these capabilities? The answer is our government. We believe that the SPM places an accurate numerical value on the income needed to satisfy capabilities that the government does not provide. FCSU goes hand in hand with the bodily health and environmental control capabilities. The additional basic needs provided for in the SPM include allowance for leisure. The capabilities of life and bodily integrity are protected by U.S. law. Senses, imagination and thought, emotions, practical reason, affiliation, and respect for other species are all provided for through the social and educational atmosphere of public schooling. Though it could be argued that capabilities are not entirely provided through the government, a reform in government programs would be needed to provide capabilities not based on income. Measuring the number of impoverished people in the United States with the SPM allows us to enact policy that addresses those who cannot meet their capabilities because of income lowness. The SPM gives a comprehensive, quasi-relative measurement of poverty, and is thus the best way to determine the number of people impoverished in the United States today.